Imagine a place where the future is supposed to be born. The most prestigious tech university on the planet, Cambridge, MIT. Now imagine being told there, don't touch, don't experiment, don't build, just memorize the formula. In 2004, one student heard that and decided the system was lying. During a thermodynamics lecture, he stood up and said the unthinkable, that the physics being taught was outdated, that engines could be 40% more efficient, that a university obsessed with theory was afraid of real progress. The room laughed. The professor smiled, the kind of smile adults use on children. And that student did something no one expected. He grabbed his backpack and walked out. For good. But the real story didn't start in a lecture hall. It started in dorm room 304, 3 in the morning. The sound of furious typing, blue light flooding the walls. His roommate was a ghost, a kid who slept during the day, hacked systems for fun, and believed humans were simply too slow. A mechanic and a hacker. Metal and code, discipline and chaos. Together, they built something that should not have worked. An electric motor with no permanent magnets, near perfect efficiency. An algorithm that didn't just control physics, it predicted it. And then came one night. A basement. 480 volts. Security cameras. Locked doors. A single decision, after which there was no going back. This is the story of how two students broke the rules of the most powerful university in the world to build the future themselves. And if you think this is just another genius story, wait. Because the next part ends with an explosion. Part 3. Room 304. Rebels at the Academy. 2004 to 2006. Chapter 1. The Red Brick Labyrinth. Fall 2004. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, greeted Elias with rain and grandeur. The campus resembled a temple of science. Columns, endless corridors, lecture halls where the history of physics was written. But after a month, Elias realized that the temple had turned into a museum. His disappointment grew drop by drop. The students here were brilliant, but bookish. They knew the formulas by heart, but were afraid to pick up a screwdriver for fear of dirtying their designer jeans. They dreamed of working in banks or consulting firms. During Professor Sterling's lecture on thermodynamics, Elias couldn't take it anymore. So, according to the Carnot cycle, the efficiency of an internal combustion engine is limited, the professor droned monotonously, writing with chalk on the blackboard. Elias raised his hand. This limitation exists only because you are using outdated materials. His voice rang out loudly in the silence of the auditorium. Sterling paused. Yes, Mr. Vent? Ceramic pistons and plasma ignition can raise the limit by 40%, Elias said. Why are we teaching 19th century theory instead of building 21st century engines? Sterling smiled condescendingly, as if to a child. Because this is a university, not a DIY club. We do fundamental science here. If you want to turn screws, you should have gone to vocational school. The audience burst out laughing. Elias felt the blood rush to his face. Not from embarrassment, from anger. He silently got up, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and left the room to the sound of the professor's chalk scratching on the blackboard. He never attended Sterling's lectures again. Chapter 2. The Neighbor from the Matrix. Elias lived in Baker House, room 304. For the first 2 weeks he lived alone. No one had seen his neighbor. The bed was covered with boxes of pizza and server parts, but the resident himself was nowhere to be found. One night, Elias woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of rapid typing. Tra-ta-ta-ta-ta. He turned on the nightlight. A guy was sitting on the bed next to him in the lotus position. He had tousled hair sticking out in all directions like antennas and huge headphones. His face was illuminated by the blue light of 3 monitors, which he had somehow managed to set up on a small table. "Who are you?" Elias asked sleepily. The guy took off one earphone. "I'm Dax Wilder. I live here. I just work at night. During the day, the ping is too high and people are too slow." Dax was a legend in certain circles. He enrolled in the computer science department at the age of 15. He hacked into the school database to change the class schedule because he didn't like getting up early. He wasn't interested in grades. He was interested in pure flow. They were complete opposites. Elias was order, metal, drawings, grease. Dax was chaos, code, virtuality, energy. But that's why they were perfect for each other. "What are you building?" Dax asked a week later, watching Elias take apart a microwave in the middle of the room. "A magnetron," Elias replied. "I want to try to focus a beam of energy." "Cool," Dax nodded. "If you connect it to the Wi-Fi antenna, we can fry the router in the dean's office. I'm trying to bypass their firewall." Elias smiled for the first time in a long time. "I'm in." And so room 304 became the laboratory. Chapter 3. Project Impulse. Winter 2005. By his sophomore year, Elias had almost stopped attending classes. He spent his time in the library studying Tesla's patents and in his room, which he and Dax had turned into a tech bunker. The idea was revolutionary. Elias wanted to create an electric motor without permanent magnets. Magnets were expensive and heavy. Elias came up with an induction vortex circuit, a motor that creates a magnetic field within itself using the complex geometry of a copper winding. It was supposed to be cheap, easy, and incredibly powerful. But there was a problem: control. A conventional controller couldn't handle the chaotic energy flows in such a winding. The motor simply melted. "I need a brain that reacts faster than a microsecond," Elias complained, looking at yet another burnt-out prototype. Dax fidgeted in his chair. He was already on his 5th can of energy drink. "The problem isn't speed, Eli. The problem is prediction. Your motor is acting like a hysterical woman. We need an algorithm that predicts the energy surge before it happens." "Can you write that?" "I can write code that will make a toaster play chess. Give me a night." Dax wrote NeuroDriver. It wasn't just engine control code. It was an adaptive system that learned from its mistakes. When they loaded the firmware into the controller, the engine changed. It no longer hummed strainedly. It began to sing. A high, clear sound. 98% efficiency, Elias whispered, looking at the instruments. "Sterling said it was impossible." "Sterling's an idiot," Dax concluded. "We just broke physics." Chapter 4. The Night of the Great Leap. Spring 2006. In the spring, they ran out of space. The prototype of the V1 engine was ready for stress testing. Elias wanted to test it at maximum speed. But the outlet in the dormitory only provided 110 volts. They needed industrial power, 480 volts. "The main building," said Elias, looking at the campus map. "There's a power line in the basement of the high-energy physics lab. There are electronic locks, cameras, and security guards," Dax pointed out. "I like it." It was an operation straight out of a spy thriller, except the budget was 0. At 2 a.m., Dax connected to the campus security network via his laptop while sitting on a fire escape ladder. The cameras are looping. You have 3 minutes to walk down the hallway while the guard drinks his coffee. Elias, carrying a heavy backpack containing the motor, slipped into the basement. He found the switchboard. He connected the terminals. His hands didn't shake. He felt the same excitement he had felt as a child on the mountain. Dax was on the line through his earpiece. "Eli, I see a power surge. Did you connect directly to the main line?" "I need all the power I can get, Dax. It's either fly or fall." "You're crazy. Start it up." Elias flipped the switch. The V1 engine roared. It sounded like a jet plane in a closed room. The RPMs jumped to 20,000 per minute. The casing began to glow from the heat, but Dax's algorithm kept the field stable. The power readings were off the charts. This little thing, the size of a watermelon, was producing the power of a sports car. And then the MIT network couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't the prototype that broke down. The building turned out to be too weak. The old transformer on the street exploded in a shower of sparks. The lights went out in the entire Cambridge neighborhood. The lab was plunged into darkness. The engine slowly stopped, cooling down in silence. The emergency lights came on. Sirens wailed. "Ellie, run!" Dax shouted into his headset. "The cops will be here in 2 minutes!" Chapter 5. The Choice, the next morning. They weren't caught at the scene of the crime, but they were quickly tracked down. Dax's logs were clean, but security cameras captured Elias leaving the building with a burnt backpack. The dean called Elias in for a chat. Professor Sterling was sitting there too. "Mr. Vent," the dean said sternly, "do you realize you've caused tens of thousands of dollars in damage? You nearly burned down the lab." "I was testing a new generation engine," Elias replied calmly. "It works." "That doesn't matter." Sterling slammed his fist on the table. "You violated all safety protocols. You are dangerous. We are expelling you." Elias looked at them, at those old oak tables, at the framed diplomas. He understood. There was nothing left for him here. They guarded the past, and he lived in the future. "You're not expelling me," he said, standing up. "I'm leaving on my own." He returned to the dormitory. Dax was already packing his things. "Did they kick you out too?" Elias asked in surprise. "No," Dax smiled, stuffing servers into a suitcase. "But they started asking questions about traffic. Besides, it'll be boring here without you." "What are our plans, boss?" Elias walked over to the window. The rain had stopped. "California, Dax. Silicon Valley. They love crazy people there." "We don't have any money." "We have an engine, and we have your brains. That's enough." Dax put on his sunglasses, even though the room was dark. "Sounds like a plan. Let's go blow up reality." Chapter 6. Concrete Jungle, Summer 2006. California greeted them not with sunshine, but with high prices. The money that Dux had withdrawn from his student accounts was melting away at an alarming rate. Silicon Valley in 2006 was obsessed with the internet. Everyone was looking for the next Facebook. Investors on Sand Hill Road laughed in their faces. "An electric motor?" asked the venture capitalist in an expensive suit. "Guys, that's last century. Electric cars are golf carts for retirees. Write me a social network for dogs, and I'll give you $1 million tomorrow." Elias left these meetings silently, clenching his jaw so hard that his cheekbones stood out. "They're blind," he said. "They don't see that energy is the new currency." The money ran out after 2 months. They couldn't afford an apartment in Palo Alto. They rented an old warehouse in Oakland, in an industrial area near the port. It was a 40-square-meter concrete room with a leaky roof. They slept on mattresses thrown on the floor near the machines. They showered at a car wash around the corner. They ate cheap noodles. But they had light. And they had the V1. Chapter 7. The Birth of the Blackbird, 2007. "We need money for copper and lithium," Elias said one evening, looking at the bills. "Investors won't give it to us. Banks won't give it to us." Dax looked up from soldering the controller board. "There's money in Oakland, Eli, but it's dirty." "What are you talking about?" "Night races. The quarter mile at the port. Bets go up to $10,000 per race." Elias looked at the pile of scrap metal in the corner, the frame of a wrecked Suzuki GSX sports bike they had bought for pennies at the junkyard. "They race on gasoline, Dax. And we'll show them electricity." For the next 3 months, they built a monster. Elias threw everything out of the Suzuki: the engine, the tank, the exhaust system, the gearbox. Only the frame and wheels remained. Instead of the heart, he put his V1 engine in there. But the problem was the battery. Standard batteries were heavy and weak. Dax did something dangerous. He bought hundreds of discarded laptop batteries on eBay. He took them apart and soldered them into a single array. "That's a bomb, Dax," Elias said, looking at the block wrapped in duct tape. "If one cell overheats, we'll blow up." "Then don't fall," Dax smiled. "I wrote software that balances the voltage, but the cooling system is up to you." Elias painted the bike matte black. No lights, no reflectors, just a shadow. They named it the Blackbird, after the fastest reconnaissance aircraft in history. Chapter 8. Ghost on the Highway, Fall 2008. The world was engulfed in the flames of financial crisis. Banks were collapsing. People were losing their jobs. The atmosphere in Auckland became hostile and desperate. Illegal racing became even more brutal. People were trying to make money at any cost. Saturday night. The abandoned runway of an old airfield. Hundreds of cars. The smell of burnt rubber and marijuana. Elias rolled the Blackbird to the starting line. The crowd fell silent, then burst into laughter. "Hey, battery, where's your extension cord?" shouted the driver of a souped-up Dodge Viper. His car roared, spitting flames from its exhaust pipes. Elias didn't answer. He lowered his helmet visor. Dax stood to the side with a laptop, monitoring the battery temperature. "The temperature is normal. Show them the future, Eli." The girl with the flag stepped into the middle. A wave. The Viper roared, losing fractions of a second to wheel spin and gear changes. Elias simply turned the throttle. The electric motor delivers 100% torque instantly, from zero. There was no vroom vroom sound. There was a sharp, high-pitched whistle, like the sound of air being cut. Zzzz! The thrush didn't drive. It teleported. Elias felt the overload push his eyes into the back of his head. The world blurred into a tunnel. He could hear only the wind and the frantic beating of his own heart. He crossed the finish line when the Viper was only halfway there. The silence at the finish line was absolute. Elias took off his helmet. His hands were shaking, but his face was stone. The Viper driver pulled up, turned off the engine, and got out. He looked shocked. "What the hell was that? Nitro?" "Amps," Elias replied. Give me the money. Chapter 9. Vant Dynamics, 2009. Over the course of that year, they became legends of the underground. Elias was known as the Ghost of Oakland. They made almost $200,000, but Elias didn't buy a house. He bought machines. Real CNC milling machines. They officially registered a company, Vant Dynamics. "We're not racing anymore," Elias said one morning as Dax counted the crumpled bills after another night. "Why? It's easy money." "It's small change, and it's dangerous. Yesterday my brake controller failed at 200 kilometers per hour. We're playing with fire. We've proven that the technology works. Now we're going to sell it." They started building custom electric bikes for wealthy clients who had seen Elias's victories. The price of one bike was $80,000. The waiting list stretched out for 6 months. Vant Dynamics became a cult brand for millionaire geeks. Chapter 10. The Shark in a Suit. Spring 2010. One day, a black limousine pulled up to their warehouse. Out stepped not another golden boy who wanted a toy. Out stepped a man in his 50s, wearing an impeccable gray suit. It was Peter Hayes, a well-known venture capitalist who had predicted the dot-com crash but survived. He went inside. Dax was sitting on a table wearing headphones, while Elias was polishing a frame covered in aluminum shavings. Hayes looked around the room. Mattresses in the corner, drawings on the walls, the smell of coffee and metal. He walked over to the Blackbird, which was standing on a stand. "I saw you on the track, Mr. Vent," Hayes said. "Impressive." "We're not selling the prototype," Elias snapped without stopping his work. "Get in line for the production model." Hayes smiled. "I don't need a motorcycle. I'm not suicidal." He walked over to the dismantled battery that Dax was soldering. "I need this. You've achieved an energy density that's 30% higher than the market average, and you have a unique cooling system." Hayes took out his checkbook. "I'll give you $5 million. Tomorrow." Dax almost fell off the table. Elias turned off the grinder. The silence became deafening. "For what?" Elias asked. "For 49% of your company's shares. And you move to a normal office in Palo Alto." Elias wiped his hands with a rag. He looked at Dax. His friend's eyes said, "Take the money, you idiot. We're rich." But Elias turned back to Hayes. $5 million for 20%. And we're staying in Oakland. I like this warehouse. It keeps us on our toes." Hayes raised his eyebrows. He was used to startups kissing his feet. "You're arrogant, Vent." "I'm an engineer. I know the value of my product." Hayes laughed. $10 million for 25%. But I'm putting my CFO in place so you don't spend it all on pizza." "It's a deal."